directive to do something, you have to follow it. And if you don't, possibly you could have, cost you your job. So if Reggie owns the security company and he tells us what we need to do, then we need to do it.
I think maybe Pac became a little bit bigger on security once he fell in love with Frank Alexander.
If I tell Frankie to call you and then you
Frankie, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Frankie? Yeah, tell Frankie to call me. Frankie, you call me when she tells you to call me Frankie.
Why?
Frankie goes to Hollywood. Hey, yo, Frankie. Frankie. Yo, Frankie.
How do you record this fool?
Why? Y'all call him Frankie?
Nah, we gonna call him Frankie.
Only our family call us that. Call me
that shit forever now.
What y'all call him?
Frankie, now we call him Frankie. Yo, Frankie, we got him, y'all. Frankie Knuckles. Frankie Knuckles up in this one. Frankie Knuckles.
No, what y'all call him first? Straight up, for real.
Frank. But now the E sounds real extra because Frank a little extra sexy in me. Too sexy for some sleeves.
That evening after the meeting at the attorney's office, Reggie said, hey, Pac is back at the Lexor. I'm going to go drop you off, go meet up with him. So he dropped me off. I saw Pac and all of the outlaws. I went over, hugged him, greeted him and everything. And, Pac said, hey, Big Frank, how was your vacation, man? I was like, it's cool, man, So he had been gambling. He was actually shooting craps at the Lexor.
We had a dinner meeting, we got a lunch meeting, and thank God it's Fridays, I believe, in Las Vegas prior to the fight starting, and I was told that I'd be taken off Tupac's shirt. You put Tupac at risk when you remove one bodyguard and say, hey Frank, you handle it. So for most of the day, all this went on, and Tupac did not have a clue that's what we were doing. I was a little upset that I was taken off of him, and I got into a little argument with Reggie Wright at lunch over it. He said, Mike, I'm putting Frank back on him, and I'm taking you back off. And I said, Reggie, that part doesn't make sense. Why not leave me and Frank on Tupac? And he said, Michael Moore, do what you're told. I'm going to put you at Club 662, and you're going to handle the security along with Al Giddens at the club.
And, Pac is Pac. He said, hey, let's go. And we go, where are we going? He goes, we're going to go over to the MGM. And I'm like, well, are we going to get a cab or how are we going to get over there? He goes, no, we're going to walk over there.
It's plenty of times he was alone without a bodyguard. We walked in the malls without bodyguards. Pac was that type of guy, He wasn't always relying on a bodyguard. He wasn't like that.
I think the reason they removed me from Tupac is because I was one of the few people that wouldn't buy into not carrying your weapon. And during no part of that day did I take my weapon off. And Mr. Wright knew that. So they removed me off Tupac so there wouldn't be a weapon there.
So Michael Moore, myself, and all of the outlaws with Tupac walked from the Lexor to the MGM.
During our conversation on the way back from the MGM Grand, I explained to Tupac that Mr. Wright was taking me off of him earlier that day. He was a little upset. He made a couple phone calls.
We get to the MGM, again, goes to a crap table, and the MGM was a little bit, more crowded that evening while he was gambling. He was gambling, he was, winning, he was doing good, and Pac said to me, go over, call Reggie, and find out what time Suge wants to meet to go into the fight. Tupac asked me to go make the call. I didn't have a radio. I couldn't contact Reggie, so I had to go to a landline phone. So I go to call. As I went to call on a landline phone, I came back to the table, and they were all gone.
During our conversation on the way back from the MGM Grand, I explained to Tupac that Mr. Wright was taking me off of him earlier that day. And I walked him all the way to his room.
So I'm walking all over the MGM looking for him before I could even realize he isn't even in the building.
I explained he's a real impatient person. I walked him to his room, and my understanding was he was supposed to wait there until other security got to him.
I get back over to the Lexor, and I'm looking all around for him. I'm on his phone, calling, trying to find him, and Pac walks up behind me. I'm like, Pac, where you been, man? I'm looking all over for you guys over at the MGM. He's like, oh, we walked back over here. I was ready to go.
So I went to my room, and that was actually the last I didn't have no knowledge he was downstairs in the lobby until Frank Alexander called me and said, "Hey Mike, why is Tupac down here?" And I even believe on the phone I explained to Frank, even then, I am not on Tupac. I kept trying to say that the only person that was assigned to Tupac at that time was Frank Alexander. We had an issue with our clothes. Me and Frank had on short pants that day. We needed to change our clothes to get into the right clothes for the fight. But there was some problems there because with me not really being on Tupac, the person who really needed to change his clothes was Frank.
So I called Michael Moore on the house phone and said, "Hey, get back down here because Pac is, getting ready to want to, take off and everything, and he's upset about Reggie. Have you talked to Reggie?"
So we let Frank go change his clothes while I waited. Then Frank changed his clothes, came back and picked up on Pac, and then I went back to my room. To this day, I believe that Tupac was under the impression that I was going to be going to the MGM Grand with him. But that wasn't the case. When I went to my room, I knew in my heart I wasn't coming back because I had been instructed to go to Club 662, and that's what I did. He got a little upset because now that I think back on it, he said he's paying for this shit and that he is telling us where we're going. I remember him saying that real loud that day in the lobby, that I'm paying for you, you go where I say go. And then I said, "Frank, you need to make a phone call to Reggie."
And Pac said, "Michael, come over to the MGM and meet us over there."
Tupac even called Reggie and had Frank get in touch with Reggie to find out where Michael Moore was at. So the problem was festering, and I knew something wasn't right. So when I went to my hotel room, I told Tim Williams, "Something is not right here, Tim. What we have to do is find out what's going on." So he said, "Don't do it. Just get dressed and go to the club." I think Frank had no idea that I received them 4 phone calls prior to Tupac getting killed.
While we were at the MGM out in the arena right there waiting to go in, I had the regular security escort us behind the line.
3 of the phone calls came from Mr. Wright, and 1 phone call came from Al Giddens, who was also head of 662 security. And I asked him, I go, "Al, why are you calling my room at 10 after 8 if I'm not supposed to be there at 10? And his answer was, "Reggie just called me and told me to call you." I said, "Well, don't call me no more." And then after that, all my phone calls came directly from Mr. Wright.
People saw Pac here, "Tupac, that's Tupac," and we're waiting for Michael Moore to show up. At that point in time, I had lost all communication with Michael Moore. I didn't know whether he was coming, what was going on, or anything.
I think there was a reason for that. And I think the reason was making sure that no one carried a weapon.
Pac was real antsy. He was like, "Where's Suge? Where comes Suge in here?" He's looking at the time and stuff, and it's getting closer for the fight to start at this point. People are going in.
Well, we got down to the MGM, right in the front of it, right where the fight was at, and I was getting ready to get out of the car. I rode with Tim Williams over there. He goes, "Mike, what are you doing?" I said, "Tim, I should just get out. Because if Reggie yells at me and I'm covering Tupac, how bad could that be?" Well, at the last second, I decided to just stay in the car. I went to Club 662.
Tupac and Alexander are alone in a crowd with no radio or weapon.
I think this needs to be let out. To me, that's the beginning of our downfall.
Suge got there with a couple of people that was with him, whoever it was that had the tickets, and we went in to the fight right as the national anthem was playing.
Tupac was to attend the Mike Tyson-Bruce Seldon fight, Vegas's 22nd highest earning fight of all time. The Tyson fight ended in 109 seconds. Tyson won by a knockout.
Again, when we talk about the shooters and everything else, you're going to talk about the defense of the shooter to escape after the hit. Now, that defense of that shooter doesn't take place just when the hit occurs. It takes place afterwards too. And if I can shift blame to someone else, put someone else in a place where they look like they had motive and they had opportunity to make this hit, and it takes the blame off of me, that adds to my defense.
And